So step one, I want to deal with the focal issues in the hair. This is a little bit too crisp, so I'm going to back up our artwork so that I have it. I label _back. And I'm going to start working with this flyaways layer, and I'm going to add just a touch of blur using Gaussian blur, probably, yeah, 0.3, I think so. Just takes a little bit of the edge off. You can already see how much better that hair that I created is integrating into the existing hair. So that just takes a little edge off. Down here, I know it's going to be an issue because there needs to be even more blur. And I'm going to do that just using the blur tool, set to 50%. And you know, this is really easy. It works really fast. Just going to go in there and try to match what I'm seeing in the existing hair information. I think as we go up the hair, the drop off is a little bit less. So, cool, we've done that level of integration. I'm going to duplicate this layer up because I actually want to fatten up the hair. I want it to be a little bit thicker for the next phase that I'm going to do. And I'm going to flatten that duplicate into the previous one. So you'll see how that just doubles up the information. Makes the edge integrate a lot better in areas where I may have had a little bit of separation on the edge because I didn't paint it quite enough. You'll see like right there, it fills it in and does a lot better job of connecting to the hair mass. So I'm going to flatten that down, like I said, and I'm going to, the next step is to compress the hair information. And I do that by setting the transparency of this layer to a selection by holding down Command and clicking on the layer. So that sets all the hair that I've created as a selection, and I'm going to add that as a mask to this layer. So here's the trick. Did you see how magically that seemed to work? Let's turn that mask on and off. So this is one of the important parts of this workflow is now that we've added a mask, it compresses the longer areas of the hair strands and really effectively mimics what light looks like shining through hair. It gives it that quality of luminosity, like light is inside the hair. But the way the mask is calculated by creating it from the transparency of the layer, where strands overlap, we get the unusual benefit of it clumping there or being wider in the mask, just the same way that hair does in life when it's backlit. So through a couple of really cool coincidences, that workflow really does a good job of recreating the visual quality of hair. Last step that I like to do is just add a little bit of tooth to the mask that we've just made. To do that, I'm going to run the camera raw filter on the mask itself. A lot of people don't think to do that, but the grain in camera raw is really, really good to use on masks because it only applies the grain to areas of value that are not white and not black. If you ran the regular noise filter on this mask, you're going to get a bunch of noise in the black. And we don't want that. So Camera Raw does a really great job of just confining any grain to any areas of the image that are gray, which is basically just going to be the edges or semi-opaque strands of hair. Works really well. So we got to crank it way up to start seeing some results. And bring the size down quite a bit, and you can start to see it form up. And I'll bring the roughness up a bit. Once again, this just adds a little bit of tooth to the mask. See before and after, just a touch. Great. Well, now we've tamed all the flyaways on the outside of the hair. And we've still got flyaways, but they're flyaways that are under our control. And through these few steps, you can follow this every single time. And like I did, I moved pretty fast around this hair edge. This is a job that could have potentially taken somebody many hours and a lot of headache to do. And just by sort of stepping outside the box and trying a different method, one that puts you in complete control of that process, just thinking a little bit differently than, oh, I can only deal with the pixels that I have right in front of me. No, in these cases, you have to stop, step away, and create the pixel information that you want. And we've just done that. Now, I'll start getting into the interior where the flyaways are going over the skin, and we're going to use a different method for that. But this is also included. So, like I said, we're going to build upon each individual step in order to create this big set of tools for dealing with hair and flyaways specifically in this example. So for the next step, I'm going to go into the image where the flyaways are extending over the skin. I'm going to bring up the client comments. We're going to take a look at exactly what's needed, and then I'm going to use frequency separation to remove those flyaways and then add more back in using the technique that we just did to add flyaways. So check it out. I'm going to drop the clone into that hair group and bring up the comments for the rest of the work we need to do. So we need to remove all of these flyaways. Makes sense. So it looks like we're keeping some in here and removing the ones on the edge that are too distracting down the back and along the chest. So I know the best way to do that is to be able to clone out, using the clone stamp tool, all of these hairs. And I still want to really be able to preserve any skin texture that's in there, which is high frequency information. And so I know the tool to do that is our FS 2.0 action, and using the tools that we use in FS 2.0 that are much different than the traditional techniques that are going to make this really easy and fast. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar with FS 2.0, it's a frequency separation that we've developed that has just a couple of tweaks that make it a lot more powerful and easy to use. I'm not going to program it here. I'm just going to run it as an action, which we include for you. So check it out. I'll show you how it works. So I'm going to bring up my action here and run that on this base smart object layer. Now when we bring up median, which you'll notice is one of the difference to the traditional methods, I'm going to look for a value in here that just takes away all of the flyaways. 6 may be too high, so let's just bring it down to 5. 4 is definitely too low. I think 5 is the way to go. We'll have a little bit more work here to do on the low after we do the cloning, but that's fine. I don't want to push it too far past 5. Great. So I've got my split. Here's my high information. We have this high layer clipped to the one below it so that when I clone on the high, making sure this is set to current layer, I can easily look back and forth between my before and after. If we didn't have this layer and I was cloning just on this high, to see before and after, I wouldn't be able to, because when I turn that off, I'm just looking at the low frequency information. So with a hard edge brush from my stamp tool, we know that most times whenever we're working on skin information, we want a hard edged brush for our clone tool to preserve the skin texture. I'm going to go in and start removing flyaways. Now, right now, I'm not worrying about any of this darker information that's on the low. I'm going to come in and fix that after I do all my cloning. So you can see that now that I've been working for a little while in this way, why I want to use frequency separation in this case. If I was doing traditional cloning without separating, I'd be having to worry about all of the underlying value information in addition to the details that I'm trying to get rid of, or relying on like the healing brush tool and having to worry about all of the little bleed outs that happen when I'm cloning and healing with it near an edge. I don't want to deal with any of that, and that's why I love a good separation. It's got to be done right, but once that high frequency information is freed from the underlying low value information, you can move really, really quickly. I'm also moving really fast, and I'm not worrying too much about the cloning into the hair and being super detailed about that, because I'm going to use the method that we just did for the outside of the hair in here to once I come back and clean up any of the remnants that were left behind that look like there should still be hairs connected to them. You'll see what I mean once we get into that phase, but I'm just going to keep cloning now in the high frequency information. Notice I keep going back and forth on my comments layer because, whether you're the one who made these comments or your client is, it's good to keep those separate. What I mean is, like, if you're doing these comments yourself, it's sometimes nice to mark yourself up so you can kind of free your brain from having to think about what line you want to create here. It's like I've already decided, I drew it, and now I can just move on and just keep referring to it. It's kind of like siloing off different thought processes as you're working in order to make your job simpler. Cool, so I'm pretty much done with the high information cleanup on this, and I'm going to come in here on the low with my mixer brush. Now, mixer brush is the other feature in FS 2.0, which is why we call it 2.0, is due to this change in the way that the tools are used. Mixer brush works excellent on the low layer, just pushing information around and mixing it. It works great for applications like this. On skin, you have to be very careful with it if you're doing skin cleanup. In this case, with just these splotches, we'll be fine. Just check out how it works. It's pretty good. You know, notice because we're in the FS stack, we don't have to worry about any of the high frequency information, any of the skin texture getting messed up. We're free to just clean really fast and really smooth with the mixer brush. Now notice my settings are pretty light here. I have wet set to 30 and flow set to 50. That's just giving me a little bit of a light touch. Not going too strong. You see how quick and easy this is. Oh, that's an indication there that I've gone a little bit too far. You can see how these halos showed up underneath the hairs here. Always keep an eye out for that. That means that you should be cloning, or brushing a little bit more carefully in those areas. Cool. All right, now I'm going to go back to my brush, regular brush. I'm going to have it at 2 pixels this time. Start at the top so we keep going the same direction. This might take 1 pixel in here, but let's take a look. I'm going to bring up a new layer underneath my high. Now, just because the high contains all of the sharp information, sharp detail, doesn't mean that you can't create new sharp detail underneath it, normally where you'd keep low information. You can create any level sharpness information underneath the high that you want to. I'll show you. So just as we were doing on the outside, I'm going to lower the opacity here of my brush down to 60. And remember, these are all going to be smooth too. I just raised the brush size a bit. You can sample some of the color from the area that you're painting back into. So, cool new feature in Photoshop CC 2018 is smoothing. Now what I can do is raise this up to maybe 40. Let's see if that works. Because I want to continue some of the lines in here, but I want a little help. You can also turn on pulled string so you can see it a little bit better. I'll show you what that looks like. So with smoothing turned on, I can make much smoother lines moving a lot slower. Normally with Photoshop, you'd have to swipe really quickly to get a smooth line. Now that they've introduced this feature, it's a lot nicer. We can move really slowly and still make really smooth lines. So see how I'm just trying to continue the lines that look like they should be connected, like this one here. And just dragging it back into the hair. And doesn't have to be perfect here. You can get away with quite a bit. Nobody's looking at individual molecules or strands of hair. Just needs to not look like a mistake. Sometimes it can be hard to hit it exactly. And I can even erase a little bit of what I've done. Tighten it up. But as you can see, this is really cool. I mean, we're just recreating the hairs so that nobody can tell that there was a lot of cloning done in this area. And if you know all these steps, that means that you don't have to be super, super careful about your cloning, because you know how you're going to fix it really easily in the next step. That's why you just stick with the system, follow it every time, and it'll eventually lead to big benefits in your workflow efficiency. Cool, so flyaway's pretty much done on this side. Let's go over to the left side. I'm gonna go back into my high and do my cloning. So I'm basically going through and doing the notes on this side. Let me just zoom out. So I'm literally doing the same exact process that I did on the right-hand side, and I think on this here, I'm actually not even really gonna do any hair painting back in. I'm not going to have to. This is pretty basic. So I'm just going to charge through this and do some speed cleanup here. Cool. So you see how quick that cleanup was with the frequency separation. Super easy. Last thing we need to do is go in and patch these areas. And we're going to do that in our frequency stack here. So I'm just going to turn off the high for this, and you can really see how good the mixer brush works in frequency separation. I switch to the mixer brush. I'm going to crank my values up to 100 this time and just start wiping this stuff away. Oops, I was on the high. Don't do that. Make sure you're on the low. Look at that. Let's make sure we have a soft round brush on. So there's a little bit of tapering and blending in that. So with mixer brush in these areas, I just tend to come from both sides here. And create some stuff that maybe looks like hair strands. I'm going to work on the high over here before moving on to the next. Cool, super quick cleanup. That's what I like. Okay, now we just need to patch this spot and we're pretty much done. Let's go into the low, get that stuff out of there. Now you see, because we did that move, it creates some crispy information in here on the high. So we need to take care of that. It's got to be a little bit more careful, but it's still really, really fast. Try to sample from the same directional areas of detail. I mean, with hair, that's important because there is still some information in there that's suggesting that the hair is going in a certain direction. So try to preserve that. I'm going to play a little bit more on the low just to get that area. You know what? Here, let's do this. I'm going to bring up a new layer, switch to my regular brush, and use that same technique with some darker values here. Just add a little bit more information in there. It's just looking a little bit brushy. All right, cool, patched. So let's zoom out. It's always nice to look at befores and afters. Before, after. Now that to me looks like a job that early on in my career I would have looked at and gotten really scared, like maybe telling the client that no, you can't do that much. But with these techniques, I was able to do it really, really quickly with a pretty high quality result. Now, the last thing that's bugging me a little bit is this area here still seems a little bit distracting. And you know now with the techniques that we have that I could certainly come in here and shave that off right in there. I just have to rebuild the skin and then paint back in the strands the same way we did over here. I might not compress the strands quite as much out here because there's not light eating these up, but it would basically be the same exact workflow to recreate that area there. And the final touch that I'm going to do is the head shape is just bothering me overall. So hair is really easy to liquefy. So what I'm going to do is merge these layers up, convert to a smart object. And I call this a late liquefy because normally you'd want to be doing all of your liquefies as like the first step in your shaping process. But lots of times at the end, once we've really simplified the scene, you see things that you want to change that you couldn't see in the beginning. So I'm going to go into liquefy, Command Shift X, and make sure I have the push tool selected. I'm going to get a really big brush, and that head shape is bugging me just a bit. I'm going to bring it in. Oops, I don't want to move the head itself, just the hair. And I want to push that up, trying to reinforce this kind of diagonal compositional thing that we have going on. So just so you know, at the end, you're not locked in, and that looks better than that to me. So there's the full workflow, start to finish, for our basic cleanup image. Now, all these techniques we're going to carry with us through the rest of the images and build upon them, use them for different applications, and you're going to see how versatile this workflow really becomes once we apply it to a wide variety of images and challenges. So let's move on to the next one.